Good morning.
Good morning.
Blessing of the Lord be upon you.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
Thank you. We continue in our study of the intertestamental period of history. And we are on lesson 7. We are, let's just go back here, and we are looking at, we have looked at Daniel's prophetic view of that time period. We considered how we're going to look at the remaining portion of our study. We're going to do it on a timeline basis. We're going to look at the kings and rulers of the Persian, Grecian, and Roman empires. We are going to look at the points of interest, especially to Judea and the Jewish people, but also we're going to look at some things in world history. That'll help us understand some of the things that are going on today. As noted, the first 100-year period is biblical, starting with that Persian period from 539 down to the 430s. Then you end biblical history with the book of Nehemiah and the prophecies of Malachi. Then you have another 100-year period before the Grecian Empire comes in. That would end the Persian period. Then you're going to have the remaining 200 years down to the birth of Christ and the return of biblical prophecy and biblical history. The second 100-year period, though, we have to rely upon apocryphal books and secular books. And I make a distinction between there because some of the apocryphal books are included in the canons of, shall we call them, sects of Christianity. I don't know if that's exactly a good term, but apocryphal meaning that they are accepted as canonical books by some, but they have really no place in scriptural canon. They're not what we would term as Holy Spirit inspired. So what we did last week, we started with with the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and just briefly looked at that. Again, this helps us to understand what's going on in our history today. As Israel was attacked yesterday, or last evening in our time, Persia here, of course, is what's called modern day Iran. Israel is this little sliver over here. And I believe there's 5 million people living in Israel. And if my memory serves me right, 80 million people in Iran. So they attacked with over 200 drones and ballistic missiles, this little area. And 99% of them were stopped before they got to there. Israel's Iron Dome took them out. So very few got in. I'd heard at one point there were 40 killed in Israel, but then now it seems like maybe there was nobody, just a few injured. So don't know the total reports on that. But you can imagine the amount of money that was spent by Iran to try to destroy Israel. And you say, well, why are they trying to do it now? They know and they understand that they've got to do it before the next election.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the next election, there's going to be a different president.
And he supports
The
it.
president that's in there now is giving them money, allowing them to have money, allowing them to go unchallenged. so they know they've got to attack now. Their idea, and we talked about this before, from the river to the sea, that's not the Euphrates and it's not the Jordan, it's the Indus. They want all that area, and really they want everything. Because we've talked about how that the Persians attacked Greece. It didn't work. Greece repelled them, then Greece became the major power. But those ancient conflicts are still in play today. That territory, what their mindset is, once it's controlled by Muslims, it must always be controlled by Muslims. And that's why they want to push Israel into the sea. Danny?
Doesn't the river butt up against India? Isn't that India on the other side?
Yes. Yes, this is India. So you have Afghanistan being in this area, Pakistan being here.
There's great conflict between the Hindus and the Muslims right along there also. Through
Yeah.
those mountains, especially through those mountains.
Yeah,
It doesn't get any publicity on the news to speak of, but it is vicious. If you dig deep enough in the news from other countries.
right. Yeah, this area up in here is Kashmir. On the other side, you have Tibet, and that's where India and China are in conflict. The whole region is just a
Messed up.
powder keg. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And they were under control. They were about broke, and the people were rising up in the streets. And then somebody let them off the hook. Well, they know that their time is short. What they're trying to do is consolidate all the Muslim population under that a modern day Persian caliphate.
You said Israel repelled a lot of the rockets with the, what you call it?
The Iron Dome.
What, I don't guess I've heard of that. What is it?
That's like the Patriot missiles
Oh,
that shoot down
okay.
the rockets, but not only their Iron Dome, but our fighter jets coming out of apparently Saudi Arabia. We've been taking them down coming out of Yemen. You know where Yemen is? Yemen's this area down here. In Yemen, there was North Yemen and South Yemen, where always before, North Vietnam, North Korea, they were the communists, the Souths were the,
Right.
it's the opposite there. The South were the communists, the North were the capitalists or free. But anyway, that nation, the Houthis, are there, and they were shooting missiles into Israel before. So the United States, from aircraft carriers in the Red Sea, were shooting down the missiles before. Well, they shot down a lot of the missiles. Also, Jordan, the nation of Jordan, here shot a lot down before they got there because they didn't want them crossing their airspace. Saudi Arabia, the same thing. And I guess the United Kingdom, Great Britain, was shooting them down also.
What a mess.
So, but with that large of an attack, the supposition is that we're trying to get them to deplete their Iron Dome stock, because those missiles are rather expensive.
Being that we're supposed to be their allies, we ought to be supporting them and supplying them,
Yes.
and we're not.
Well, that's a political problem that we have.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Make sure we got a red dot.
yep. Okay. Back to our lesson, that brings, so these things have been going on for centuries. Anyway, and then we looked at Cyrus the Great and what he had done, and Darius I Hystaspes. No, we didn't look at him. That's where we want to start today. We ended up with Smerdis. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about Smerdis as we get into Darius I Hystaspes today. Okay, he reigned from 522 BC to 486 BC. Cambyses had died without descendants, leaving no direct descendants of Cyrus the Great surviving. So Darius was a distant cousin, and he's the one who then ascended to the throne. His major achievements were an internal organization of the kingdom. He didn't do a whole lot of fighting outside of Persia. He had enough to deal with internally. But he subdued rebellions and some attacks from neighboring nations. But his great achievements were the great architectural projects within Persia. He pursued the same policy regarding the Jews as Cyrus the Great. In other words, he was for religious freedom. And I remember Cambyses wanted to, especially in Egypt, destroy Egyptian religion and set up a Persian style religion. But because he concentrated so much on Egypt, he didn't pay much attention to Palestine, which was probably a good thing for Judah. But also it was kind of a bad thing, because the governors there, the political leaders who weren't Jewish, they were getting their way with things. So what he did, he restored their right. When Darius comes in, he restored their right to rebuild the temple, which was lost under Cambyses and or Smerdis, who's also known as Artaxerxes X. Remember, that's what I call him, because there's so much confusion in biblical scholarship, but that's the logical place to put him. And remember what had happened. Cambyses thought that he had killed not Smerdis,
Xerxes or
I want to say Gamada. Have to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gamada. He thought he thought he had, this is what some scholars say, he thought he had killed Gamada. And so he gets the throne. So he's down in Egypt, he's carrying on campaigns, but he's losing. All of a sudden, he's headed back, but he hears that there's been a rebellion, and that this Smerdis, who looks like Gamada, I think I've got that correct.
Now, maybe that one starts with a B, isn't it? The name starts with a B, isn't it? Go back to that one slide again, where it says
Gamada, a look-alike pseudo-Smerdis,
All right, gotcha.
seized the throne.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, he did. He killed Smerdis, or he killed Smerdis, or at least he believed he killed Smerdis. The schemata looked like Smerdis, so Gamada takes the throne and takes the name Artaxerxes. But not Artaxerxes I. He comes along later in history. So that's why I term him Artaxerxes X. Well, Cambyses is on his way home and he dies. He dies. So that leaves the throne open, except you got this, okay, Smerdis, also known as Bardia. There's the B that you were talking about. All right, so back to where we are, where we end up. So, but he had restored their rights. This is Darius then comes along. He gets rid of pseudo-Smerdis, Bardia, whatever, Artaxerxes X. And he restores their right to rebuild the temple, which was lost under Cambyses or Smerdis. And that's where, remember, under Cyrus, the children of Israel, the Jews, were allowed to come back, rebuild the temple. They start and then they stop. Why do they stop? Because of the persecution. And it goes on for a while. And finally, the governors, the Persian governors there send a letter, and Artaxerxes, and we'll look at that here in chapter 4, verse 7 of Ezra. In the days of Artaxerxes, Bislam and Mithridath and Tabeel and the rest of the associates wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. If you're reading down through the book of Ezra, you know that the first part of the book of Ezra is going back to that time period of Cyrus and Cambyses and Darius. Is talking about the building of the temple. And so there you have an Artaxerxes, but that's not the Artaxerxes you read about later that comes after Xerxes. Xerxes and Esther and Mordecai. So that confuses scholars. But if you have this guy, while Cambyses is down in Egypt or on his way home, and he takes the throne, the letter comes to him, and he's not of the persuasion of Cyrus and Darius. Stop them from rebuilding the temple. And that's where that decree comes to stop building the temple. Then when the Jews come back and say, wait a minute, Cyrus wanted us to rebuild the temple, we've got the letters to prove it. By that time, now who's the emperor? It's Darius. Darius I Hystaspes. Because Smerdis, or not Smerdis, pseudo-Smerdis, is only there for about 8 months before Darius kills him. Following along? So that's the proper place. He doesn't have that, this pseudo-Smerdis, this Artaxerxes X, doesn't have much of a place in history. So, just kind of like he's wiped out. But that helps us to understand biblically where he's at. So in 520 BC, Darius confirmed the decree of Cyrus to rebuild the temple with a new edict, and that comes in Ezra chapter 5 and chapter 6. And then the temple was finished in about 516 BC. That's in Ezra 6:15. So that's Darius's big claim to fame. When we're looking at how he deals with the Jewish people. we come to Xerxes. And this one is a little bit more expanded. He's the one that deals more with the Jews, not in Palestine, but in Persia. Esther and Mordecai. So he reigns from 539 BC to 331 BC. Is that correct?
That's not what you have on the screen.
Oh, that was the Persian Empire. Darius 522 to 486. Okay. Persian Empire 539 to 331. That's where we're headed to. That's that first 100 years or so. Xerxes 486 to 465. He only reigns for what, 21 years? That's not very long. But in 486 BC, Xerxes succeeds to the throne of Persia after the death of his father, Darius I Hystaspes. In 485 BC, the rebellious province of Babylon is destroyed by Xerxes. Remember, when the Persian Empire takes Babylon, Darius is the one, there's a Darius who goes in and destroys the city of Babylon and kills Belshazzar. And he's the king over Babylon, but he's under Cyrus the Mede. So there's a king over Babylon, the province, but they're still under the Medo-Persian Empire. Well, when Xerxes becomes the emperor, so to speak, not so to speak, literally becomes the emperor, Babylon, the province, rebels. So he puts down this rebellion. There's no longer a Babylonian province. In July of 480 BC, Xerxes I, via Mardonius, makes extensive preparations to invade mainland Greece by building depots, canals, and a boat bridge across the Hellespont. Remember we talked about that before? That's the beginning of the Greco-Persian, the real beginning. There's been excursions, but this is the big battles that are going to start the change from Persian Empire to Grecian Empire. In August of 480 BC, the indecisive battle of Artemisium between the Greek and Persian fleets of Xerxes I. The Greeks withdraw to Salamis, which is across the little sea channel, what have you. So they're spared for a while. And then in August of 480 also, the Battle of Thermopylae, which is what the movie that came out just a few years ago, the 300, the Spartans. Okay, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas and other Greek allies hold back the Persians led by Xerxes I for 3 days, but are defeated. And you're talking about, I forget how large the army of Persia was. It was huge. But 300 held them back for those 3 days so that the Greeks could get back to Salamis and there recuperate, restructure, get all their forces started again. Then in 480 BC, in September, in September 480 BC, the Battle of Salamis, where the Greek naval fleet led by Themistocles, hope I get that right, Themistocles, defeats the invading armada of Xerxes I of Persia. 479 BC, Xerxes' Persian forces are defeated by Greek forces at Plataea. This is right after that then, and I think that should be August. What do I have there? I just got a G. Oh, FG, okay. 479 BC, Persian forces defeated at Plataea. So after this great navy, his naval forces defeated, they're defeated at Plataea, effectively ending Persia's imperial ambitions in Greece. In 478 BC, Xerxes builds the Gate of All Nations, the Hall of 100 Columns in the Grand Palace of Xerxes. That means he gave up. He gave up and he went home and he starts building things. He tried, but he failed. Biblical history. The third year of King Ahasuerus' reign. Well, who's King Ahasuerus?
Wasn't he the king when they were going to kill the Jews, Mordecai? And that's who Esther married.
Who is that?
Is that another one of the Smarties?
No, it's Xerxes.
Sorry.
It's Xerxes. Because you have the Persian name, and then you have the Jewish name for him, you have the Greek names, all of these come in. This is Xerxes, but in the Bible he's called Ahasuerus. And in the third year of his kingship, his reign, he banished his queen Vashti. And we talked about this, last Sunday evening? Seeking a new queen, he gathered beautiful maidens in the citadel of Susa. Esther, a descendant of the Benjamite Kish, was orphaned and raised by her cousin Mordecai. When Esther was taken to the palace, she captured the king's heart and became his queen. Trouble brewed when the king's grand vizier, Haman, plotted to annihilate all Jews in Persia. Remember the reason why he wanted to get rid of them?
They wouldn't bow down to him. Or he's the one they wouldn't bow down to.
Mordecai would not bow down to him. But also because he was an Agagite, there was probably a long historical hatred of the Jews, because King Agag, who might have been one of his ancestors, was killed by the Jews and his kingdom was taken. So Esther courageously revealed Mordecai refused to bow down before Haman, leading to this dark plan. Esther courageously revealed Haman's intentions to the king, resulting in Haman's execution and permission for the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. Xerxes, Ahasuerus, could not rescind his order that the Jews could be killed on that day, because that was written in Persian law. And that's one of the great, how do we want to put it, the great accomplishments of Persia. When we talk about Greece, accomplishments of the Grecian Empire, the Greek language became a universal language. Rome, the roads that they built. Babylon, where you had a king and could unify the whole world, so to speak. But here, the law, where you have the law, it just wasn't the whims and dictates of a person. If there was a law made, you keep the law. But of course, that should go back to the law of Moses too, correct? But you have those principles that are involved there. You have a king who's over all. You have law that even the king must obey. And then you have a common language coming in, and then you have these roads that connect the whole empire, and you're set up for the gospel to go to the whole world. Because everybody speaks the same language, and they can get everywhere. And there's laws that help to promote that. God's purpose running all the way through here, and some scholars have referred to this as like the scarlet thread that runs all the way through, referring to the blood of Christ, of course, but all the way through, historically. It's there. So she reveals this plot. Because he cannot rescind that order, hey, you can kill the Jews, he makes another order, the Jews can defend themselves. And when the Jews defend themselves, they survive. That leads to the creation of the Feast of Purim. The book of Esther explains the origins of the Jewish holiday of Purim. On that day, Hiram's order was to take effect. The Jews turned the tables and triumphed over their foes. That Feast of Purim is still celebrated today.
Is that like the Passover kind of like deal, or what is it?
No, it's a feast where they give gifts to people and get together. And go ahead, Karen.
Gifts of food they'll give to their friends, and they'll dress up in costumes, and the man will read the book of Esther at the temple, then he'll read it at home. Then they read it the next day twice at the temple, and to their friends they have over for dinner, and it's just like a celebration.
Although we know the further course of the reign of Xerxes is but an unbroken tale of debauchery and bloodshed, which came to an end in 464 BC, when he was murdered by two of his officers, Mithridates and Artabanus, and Artaxerxes Longimanus, Longimanus,
Where did they come up with all these crazy names?
his son. Well, Longimanus, one hand was longer than the other for whatever reason. And that's how he got that name. But that's the one referred to as Artaxerxes the First. And that's why we got going back to that pseudo-Smyrnus, Artaxerxes X. Okay. But this Artaxerxes First, then his son, and you see about him in Ezra chapter 7, Nehemiah chapter 2, reigned in his stead. And that's from Ellicott's commentary for English readers. All right. That's as far as I wanted to get to today. So it's a rather short lesson. So if you've got any questions or comments, we can entertain them for a few minutes.
That area on the map that we were looking at earlier, of Persia, wasn't that at one, wasn't Babylon a part of that? There you go.
Okay. Babylon's here, and our Babylonia is here. Babylon, the city, would be up in this area. So kind of draw a line here. Susa, it's more or less the capital that we're talking about of Persia here. Talking about the citadel being in Susa. So these areas constantly fought.
But Babylonia actually bordered what is today's Israel, right? It went all the way over to the, almost to the sea.
No, you still have Syria in here.
Okay,
And then you have the Assyrians up in this area. When we start off in history, all right, and when you pick up with the biblical, yeah, if we start off with biblical history, the Hittites, and I'm not sure just how far their reign was, but you hear about the Hittites first, then the Egyptians, then the Assyrians, and the Assyrians at the time of the first prophet. Oh, isn't that awful? The one who ran away.
Oh,
Jonah?
Jonah?
Jonah. Jonah is sent to Nineveh. Shame we don't have the cities on here, but Nineveh might be up in this area. He goes over here to go this way. He's swallowed by the sea creature and he's spit out over here. Right?
Long spit.
3 days later, unless it goes, but it goes down to the depths of the sea. Is there a channel down under there? Okay. But he's over here and then he comes out and he preaches to them. Okay. So that's the Assyrians. The Assyrians are the ones who destroy the northern kingdom, 721, 720 BC. Then the Babylonians, they rise and they take a large area and they destroy the southern kingdom. They destroy Assyria and then they destroy the southern kingdom in finally in 586. And Egypt is just not very powerful because they try to regain power, but they get defeated up here in the battle. I believe it's the Battle of Carchemish, when Babylon really takes power. But then there's a constant tension over here till the Medes, Media is up here, Persia, the two get together, they defeat Babylon. You have the Persian Empire. They're constantly fighting here and up here. They want to take Greece. They get repelled, rising up, we'll study that, 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how quick we go through to get into that. But that leads to the rise of the Greek Macedonia. Philip of Macedon is the one who comes in. If you read about the Greeks, all these little Greek city-states, Sparta, Athens, and all of them, they're constantly fighting among one another because they don't want a centralized power. So it's only when they get together that they defeat people like the Persians. Philip of Macedon is able to get them together to repel the Persians, or slightly after the Persians are repelled. And finally, his son, Alexander the Great, unites them totally and starts his invasion. Remember, he was the goat that comes, takes the ram and just, but he gets over here and he dies.
Where was the Tower of Babel being built at?
Well, the Tower of Babel predates a lot of this. It's right after the flood. And of course,
It would be on that map.
it would still be
Right here.
in this area of the Euphrates. And if depending on what Moses is using, if Moses' terminology is correct, should be, the Garden of Eden would be in this area too. Because the Tigris and Euphrates, and then a couple other rivers are mentioned that provide water to the Garden of Eden. And man is cast out of the Garden of Eden. You have a great explosion of population. Then you have the flood. With the flood, Noah ends up in here somewhere. So the population explodes again with Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Ham, and this is what we talked about. Ham, Shem, Japheth. So biblical history up until this time, what we're looking at was basically Ham and Shem, and the fighting's there. It's not till they start attacking up here that Japheth comes in and the world changes. But the Tower of Babel then would be in this area.
Do you know if archaeologists have ever found any evidence of the Garden of Eden, or you think that would never be found?
It would be destroyed in the flood.
Yeah, okay, completely, okay.
We don't know what the face of the
Earth looked like.
world looked
Right,
like.
right.
We know that all the continents were together. And that since that time, the continents have taken their positions and are still moving.
Wouldn't that be neat if they could find evidence of that? That it adds more credibility to the, even more credibility to the Bible, if they could find evidence of that, but.
Well,
Be
the
fascinating.
evidence is so overwhelming now.
I
you
know, but I'm just saying that'd be fascinating if they ever did find
But-
something like that.
But the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel may not be what people think the Tower of Babel is. It's probably just a ziggurat. How big do you think maybe it was?
I don't know. people would have to
1,000
believe,
feet tall,
believe,
500 feet
people
tall,
would have to
300.
believe it was up into the clouds, but I don't think it
That's
ever
where they
got
were
that.
aiming.
Only what we see in the movies.
Yeah, and I don't think it ever got
There you
that
go.
high.
But the point of it wasn't how high it had gotten.
The idea.
The point
behind
of
it.
God
Yeah.
wanting it destroyed
Yeah.
was they're building this and they're ignoring what I told them. Go into all the world and multiply, be fruitful and multiply.
Yep.